So here we are, second episode of the Scott and Rebecca show. I don't think we'd called it that last time we'd spoke. I think we decided that after the last one, didn't we?
You're right. We're chewing the fat on that one.
Yes, but we have decided to keep it simple and aligned to both of our identities. But yes, thank you for everybody who is watching this now, who is watching this in the future. Thank you for being here. We know you're going to get so much from this, and this is going to literally smash the internet to bits. But Scott, yeah, I mean, we just briefly had a chat before we came on, and obviously, as usual, we've been voice noting all morning. And one thing that, has really, I suppose, come to light for me, probably over the last few weeks, but today in particular, is how when we are trying to, improve our reality, bring our desires into reality, I think that we have to be so clear on who it is that we are. And I think so many of us are not. So what I mean by this is that you may be, so for me particularly, I was very much conditioned, through my experiences, through society, to think that my job, my business was my identity. And that every time I tried to bring something, tried to bring work in, tried to manifest the greatest business, something would always, I don't know, get in the way, I suppose. And I think what I've realised is that the reason for this is that, don't get me wrong, by the way, business has been great. It's had its ups and downs like anything, but I've been running a successful business for quite a while. But I think that what I've realised is that I was modelling everything on a version of myself that I felt I needed to be. So I proved myself as a child growing up through work, through being, successful academically, through then going into a job and working really hard and having this great work ethic. And whilst, that I'm never going to be the person that doesn't work and that doesn't want to have something to get up for every day, what I have realised is that actually that isn't my whole identity, and that is only a part of who I am. And actually, when I'm trying to visualize my life, it doesn't revolve around that. It revolves around being in Italy with my children by the sea, doing all the things that I love. And I kind of pushed those away, thinking that I had to manifest my best client, my best business, etc. And so I think that a lot of people are struggling because they don't really know who they are.
It's a really interesting overview because there's two sides to this. The first one is what you've just described. If you think about society, the structure, and everything that the modern world, especially in the first worlds, the Western worlds, it's all about fitting into a system.
Yes.
It's about producing an output, and by and large, anybody who works within that system, i.e., as an education, as a career, you're feeding into that system. That's the first side. The second side, which is being suppressed by that, is what you touched on a couple of points there. You can call it identity. That's possibly the right way to describe it, but it's more fundamental than that, is that we are beings of feeling. And more importantly, is that we have desires. And desires come from a lack of something. If you think about anything, it might be, a better career, a family, a home, holiday, living somewhere else, they're all coming from a place of lack. And from the desires, the current world we live in suppresses those. So we never have that ability to really fulfill not our potential, but to have a full life. Because until you embrace your desires, you can't even move on to the next phase, which is to then move them into being in your conscience to make them a reality. But if you can't even get to that first base of desires because it feels wrong, or You know, like you mentioned about being in Italy, what has that got anything to do with your career? If you really strip it right back, but it goes all back to the environment. You know, you're drummed in from an early age. Go to school, do your exams. You know, leave school, either go to university or you know whatever it might be, get a job. Then it's climb the corporate ladder, or you know make sure there's enough coming in. Then rent a house, buy a house, have a family. Tick 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 tick. Where's the desire? All you're doing is mirroring what everybody else has told you to do.
Yeah.
And that's not a criticism of that.
Well, but this is the thing, you know, when it's almost, you know, it's saying like we do become slaves to the system, don't we? We, you know, we start striving for, you know, all of the luxuries, the house, the car, the designer clothes, the holidays, you know, we start sacrificing what I think is more important and, you know, to gain those things. And again, I'm not saying this isn't me going, right, nobody needs to work, nobody needs to climb a corporate ladder. I'm not suggesting that at all. But I think the world that we're living in is just making it more and more difficult, you know, for us to obtain some of the things that we want to obtain. And then what happens is that we then become stuck in that hustle space, and we don't create the headspace that we need to really figure out what matters to us and who we are. And you know, it's almost like whenever you think about it, when you go on holiday, this is the other thing, yeah, we go on holiday. What do we go on holiday? Once a year for 2 weeks a year, right? And in that time, how many times will people go, oh my God, I had a light bulb moment. Oh my God, I've had, you know, I want to change my life. I want to realize I'm not living the life I wanted to live. I'm living the life of somebody else. And then we come back, we have these great ideas, but then we get stuck back in the system again because that 2 weeks a year is not enough actually for you to rewire the way that you're thinking, for you to reprogram that computer system that's in your brain, right? And I think and I talk to this quite a lot to my clients who I work with that are often in leadership positions, and again they are 110 miles an hour, and they'll go on and they're constantly going on leadership programs, they're constantly consuming information, they're reading leadership models, they're having coaching, etc. But all that's doing is they're just absorbing more information, more external information, and they're not creating enough space to just sit back and go, actually, why am I making that decision today? Why did I have that, you know, why did I take that conversation down that route with that person today? And again, right, I'm bringing it back to this because I think that if we're not leading ourselves effectively, then how can we ever lead anything else? And this is, you know, kind of where we're going in the world, I think.
Well, you see it so much. I mean, in your inner space, the only person you have any control and influence over is yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you have control over your desires and your consciousness, and from that you can manifest anything you want. However, that is opposed to everything that we're taught in society. No one person has a greater stake in your life than yourself, yet we're surrounded by systems which have been created over hundreds, sometimes thousands of years to create environments where we are influenced and to a degree controlled by others. Um, Whereas actually, you know, you want to live in Italy. Who says you have to have a job to do that? Who
Mm.
says that you need to work to have the most amazing life and have everything you ever desire? But that's how we're programmed. It has to be an output from a job and from a career because that's what we've been told since we were knee high to a grasshopper, as they say.
So anybody who's watching this then, Scott, what would you, that turns around and goes, yeah, but I can't sustain myself if I haven't got a job. How can I buy a house in Italy? How can I live in Italy? How can I eat? What would you say to that?
When I was a
Because
kid
by the
growing up,
way, kind of trying to figure out the how.
yes, yes, you're a bugger for that. The
Yeah.
The thing is, it's. I'll give you an example today because we're both business owners, and so today, or so in the last 24 hours, I've had two um, conversations, one by phone call and one by messaging on LinkedIn. Neither of those were anything that I was currently working on. So now the question comes, how did that happen? And this is the whole point of um, the 4D, your desires, your consciousness. You, we don't have control over anything external to us. We only have control over ourselves. But we allow the 3D to control so much of our thoughts every day. You wake up in the morning, it's I don't know, put the washing on. I know we both work out. We have our routines, our processes. These are things that we've created within a 3D. Some of those of the 3D is where we are today with our current desires. But so many of those things what have happened along the way. You told me a story about meeting a potential client recently. How that ever happened in terms of the 3D, it didn't. You was talking to me way before then about manifesting certain types of clients. Lo and behold, they start coming through. But you're not there prescriptive going, in a doctor's like, what, tick this, tick this, tick that. It doesn't, life isn't that. You can manifest anything you desire, but you have to move it from a desire to a consciousness through feeling. And we're programmed not to feel, we're programmed to work.
Well, this is the other thing, and I think this is really important because I think you're right. Anything that you are able to connect with and feel, right? Because this is the other thing, right? I am a big believer that there are multiple timelines out there, and you can, once you tune into the frequency of a particular timeline, you'll experience that will become your reality. And I think that the issue is that because we've become so numb to any of that, we are letting the external world control which timeline that we're in. And you think about it, whenever we are, we get to make hundreds, thousands of decisions every day, and each decision has the potential to change your life in a moment, right? Every decision that you make, every choice that you make in that moment can change who you are, right? This is the other thing. That was another massive eye-opener for me, because sometimes we can get so stuck in thinking, oh my God, this is my reality, this is when everything's going to get better. Well, they'll get better the minute you decide that they do. Yeah. And I mean, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but it's also when you talked about like bringing things into your reality, so connecting with that. I think, sorry, I'm going to take a step back, because I think if you can't feel a frequency, you're not going to connect with a frequency. So you are potentially actually in a space that you're not connected with because you're not feeling it, because you're listening to all of the external noise, right? You're just on autopilot, is what I'm trying to say. You're living your life by rules that were created by somebody else, which means that you're not connected. You don't have feeling with that. I'm not saying it doesn't create emotions and thoughts and stuff like that. It does, but you're not really deeply connecting with what it is. So you're not bringing it into your reality. And then I think there is this whole thing about how you don't, like you talked before, you said that I'd spoken about particular clients and then they've kind of appeared. And yes, but the other thing to bear in mind is that if you have not become the identity, the person that is ready to receive that, it's not going to stay either. Because actually, technically, you can bring anything in, right? But if you haven't figured out what you are and who you are first, you're never going to keep it.
Exactly, because this comes back down to when you have that desire, you have to then connect with it. That's what creates your identity.
Yeah.
But you think about, and I know I go back to this a lot, but you go back to your childhood. How long did you spend learning the times table? How long did you spend learning the alphabet and all of the other things?
Not long. I told myself I knew it already, and actually,
Well,
to
of
be fair,
course, silly
I
question.
I was reading my mum. I remember like I was. You know, she was like they were like we've spoken about our love for reading. I was reading things before I'd started school, before I'd been to nursery. My mum was like fascinated. you know.
But,
Sorry,
but
I
that,
digress.
no, it's all good because that is a really good example. So you learnt that. When or who taught you to feel?
Taught me to what? Sorry.
Feel.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's not done through our parents. It's not done through our friends. It's not done through the education system.
No.
You know, um, we're at a point in our lives where we're going through this journey where where has that journey been? You know, we've both discussed this before that we've had experiences, desires fulfilled, you know, and we've spoken about how that's come about, but we haven't recognized it immediately. We haven't built on that because it was not, you know, who do you talk to about those kind of things? Because people would think you were crazy.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
so you go back to what you were saying before about Italy. Okay, why is that unreasonable to think that that's possible? The reason why is because you're still conditioned to live in a 3D until you can turn your back on the 3D. And I do firmly believe that that statement, and it's said by many about you can only have one identity, and trying to live in two identities, you can't split your time, and effectively you're either going to live in one identity or the other. You can't be both. It's like when you've got two kids. You know, one of them's playing up and the other one wants your attention. Well, you can only give it to one or the other
yeah,
because you can't give it to both. And that's very much about fulfilling your desires. You can't fulfill a desire if you're still living how you're living today on the premise of holding yourself back.
yeah, yeah. One and just to, because I don't know if we did cover this in the last one, but even so, it's never a bad thing to go over it again. But when you just thinking though, you know, when you talk about the 3D, what do you mean? Or when we talk about the 3D, what do we mean? For anyone who doesn't understand that.
Okay, so you have two aspects, 3D and 4D is what people call it. Or another way could be inner state and outer state. So the 3D is where we're living right now. And the 3D is built on your current 4D, so your current status of where you are. So whatever you see in the real world right now, that's been created by you, probably subconsciously, because consciously we're on that journey to make conscious decisions in terms of fulfilling our desires. So everything we've got today is a reflection of ourselves. That's the 3D. And lots of people, they talk about 3D in all different kinds of ways, but this is the world that we've created. Um, this is what we're living right now. But the problem is that 95% of it, if not more, would have been created subconsciously because we're not awakened of the 4D. So what is the 4D? The 4D is our inner state, what's within us. So this is now going really about what do we really want, you know, our desires. Um, you know, that this is working within. So this is our internal being. But
Yeah,
we're not conditioned to living within that because everything genuinely comes from within. You know, so you have that desire until you bring that into your consciousness through feeling, it will just stay as a desire. And we have desires all the time, and you never move to anything else because we don't put the feeling into it to make it into something as a reality.
Yeah.
But that's the transitional piece.
It's interesting though, actually, because you talk about how we are not taught or we're conditioned to, not live in our 4D, but actually that's exactly what we're doing as children, isn't it? You know?
Oh, absolutely. The child's imagination just runs wild, and it's unconditioned. Uh, it's not been developed. It's undeveloped at that time, and I don't mean that disrespectful to children. I mean that we don't know how to harness that, and by the time we get to an age where we're mature, we develop mature from a maturity point of view, we're then into a system from our parents and, as I said before, all these other systems in society that we're not allowed to use our imagination anymore.
Mm. Yeah,
Um, you
exactly.
know,
Exactly. And then we also then start to forget about, we stop believing in miracles. We stop thinking. I mean, even this thing, we talk about synchronicities. So synchronicities are those little things that happen during the day that you think are, don't make sense, are not logical. So you'll be thinking about something and then all of a sudden somebody will call you to talk about that thing, or do you know what I mean? And
yep.
um we believe that they are synchronicities when actually they make perfect sense because we're all connected. What I'm thinking and feeling, you're thinking and feeling, Scott,
Yeah,
because we have a
absolutely.
collective consciousness. That's quite a hard one to get your head around as well sometimes.
But again, only like-minded people um, will have this within themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation probably with anybody else because we've hit a timeline at the same time to be on the same plane. And the irony is that when we first met, it was purely business. It was August, September, October last year time. I can't
Yeah.
quite remember now. Um, and how we've ended up where we are today from that first conversation is crazy in some respects if I was making that statement back then. But it isn't crazy right here now because we've both been going on this journey separately for quite some time, different time, at different times, to get to the point where our paths crossed the second time, and it created what we're doing right now on this call, and
Yeah.
the friendship and we've been building as a result of all of that. But the thing is that going back to keep going back to your Italy desire, some of the conversations we've had, the Italy piece has always been in the background, whereas actually it's probably your biggest desire of everything you've ever shared with me.
Yeah.
Yet, I really respect and understand how that has been played down because some of your other desires bring you back into the 3D of the how. So if I do this, I can get to Italy. Whereas actually, manifest in Italy, you will get to Italy, and the universe will figure out how that's going to work. You don't even have to worry about that. But the moment we go through that process of manifesting that, we have to stop checking, and it's not necessarily checking um, the 3D. It's checking ourselves, which we're
Yeah.
guilty of doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting though, that whole thing of, we feel like we've got to do certain things to get us there. And we will have to do certain things, but we don't have to have it all planned out because the universe will just open the path, won't it? And
Yeah,
it's almost the hardest thing because fundamentally what manifestation means, it means believing in the unseen. Yeah. And we have been taught to not believe anymore in the unseen. We have been taught to not question anything. We have been told that there's an answer to everything, and actually that's not the reality, because how we can think that we have the answer to everything is insane when you think about what we are a part of. We're a part of something that is infinite. We are part of a universe that people talk about us being little ants. I mean, that's even kind of massively amplifying it, isn't it? Another thing that, another thing that I kind of almost come to terms with more recently as well is I do believe that creation is finished and there are timelines that we can tune into, a little bit like a radio station, which is another thing, by the way. We can believe in Wi-Fi working, we can believe in listening to people that are maybe hundreds of thousands of miles away, but we can hear them because of the airwaves, right? Yet we can't believe in the energy and the collective consciousness. But it's interesting because one thing, I digress there, but one thing that has kind of really become clear for me more recently is how we're not all here. Yeah, we've probably all got some kind of, I don't know, place in the world. I'm not saying that we don't, but we don't necessarily all have this, burning purpose that we need to fulfill here, because actually, life is not that black and white. It's not that fixed. In fact, nothing is fixed, right? This table is not fixed, right? Quantum physics tells us, doesn't it, that like 99.9 recurring 9% of whatever's in front of us is actually made of kind of empty atoms, isn't it? Right. And there's this whole idea that actually nothing is real until you look at it, right? Because again, our brains interpret, they only take in a certain amount of information and then it interprets it so that we can literally just live our lives and do what we need to do out of danger. But I want to go back to what I was saying. We are kind of almost taught that we've got to be connected to a purpose, that we've got a life's and a soul's purpose, and we need to, make sure that we're on that path. And I think that was what made me feel so connected, or not connected. That's not the right word, actually. That's what made me feel that I had to do certain things with my business. I was like, yeah, but I'm on this mission, and this mission means I've got to do X, Y, Z. And I've actually realized that that's not the case. And actually, my life's mission is just to, have as much joy, fun, connection, pleasure while my soul is here at this particular time as possible. It's not necessarily to awaken people. If through what I'm doing, I do, amazing, fantastic. But my job is to love my life, experience my life to the fullest, be conscious about that, not be robotic about it, as we all are, and just have an impact on those small few people around me.
But what you touch on is very relevant in terms of that this all comes back down to your desires. So you're right, everybody's desires will be different. And again, if everybody was unlocked at the same time on the planet and everybody had unlimited desires in terms of the shackles of the world as we see it today, everybody would still grow at different rates in terms of their desires, because everybody has different aspirations in terms of those desires. Desires, for me, or something I picked up on yesterday, and I think it's a perfect analogy of a desire is created by the lack of something,
Yes, you said,
of what
yeah.
you, yeah. So
Yeah.
in that respect, for some people, what you may have, another person desires, but what someone else has, you desire. And I don't mean you envy them or you want to be like them. I'm just using that as an example. It's more about, what you want from life um, is different to another person. So even if everybody became shackled today and everybody's minds were free, we would still have that different levels of desires from different people because everybody's different and unique.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there is only one of, we're only competing against one of one.
Yeah, yeah, and the thing is that
And I think
if you carry on.
no, you go on.
And all I was going to say was that everybody's desires are different. So, it it's it creates an environment where we're, we're we're holding ourselves back from fulfilling our full potential.
Well, I said that to you, didn't I? That might be a great place to kind of wrap things up actually before we move on to our next topic next time. But I said to you this morning, didn't I, that I did a video on my, I think it was on my YouTube, and somebody commented saying, "You've got amazing energy." And oh, what was it? You've got amazing energy, and you're not showing. Oh, what was it? Oh my god! I told you, Scott. What was it? Oh, that's so annoying.
But
Something
something
about my
like
energy and how.
you're destined for greater things. In summary, I can't quite remember how it was
Well,
worded.
it was. Yeah, and I need to find it now because it's going to drive me crazy. But it was. It was. It was. It was. It was. Oh yeah, you've got great energy. Your potential is much greater than you currently show.
That's it. Yeah.
And you told me in how is
No, go
yeah,
on.
you said yeah, exactly. I'm not going to swear.
but it's I've been saying that for a long time. But again, just to conclude on that comment, because I know we're wrapping things up, we surround ourselves by people in the 3D, which are a reflection of ourselves, which are a reflection of our doubt, our lack of confidence in fulfilling our desires and living the life we deserve.
Mm, exactly. And you do deserve everything that if you can feel something, if you can feel something, it's yours to have. You just haven't connected with that frequency yet.
Absolutely agree with you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Scott.
Always a pleasure having these
And
chats.
yeah, always. And again, if anybody's got any comments or questions or suggestions for future topics, please make sure that you do pop it in the comments.
Goodbye.
Yep, thank you. Thank you very much.
Speak to you soon.